In this lesson, we will cover recognizing hosted and non-hosted components, placing components at the correct location, and adjusting room calculation points. In this model, there's currently not any lighting fixtures or electrical devices placed. We will place a few lighting fixtures and then we'll place a few receptacles. Lighting fixtures are typically placed in reflected ceiling plan views. That way you can see the ceiling grid. So I'll open the lighting ground floor RCP view, and as discussed you can see the ceiling grid in the architectural model. To begin placing lighting fixtures, switch to the Systems ribbon, and then in the Electrical panel, click Lighting Fixture. The first thing you want to do when placing lighting fixtures is select the correct type in the type selector. In this case, there's just one family loaded with several types, but in large projects, you could have hundreds of types. And so you can use the search field to narrow that down. And so the nice thing about the search field is that it does not have to be case sensitive and it does not have to be exact. And just to see what I mean by that, if I type lighting, you can see lighting highlight in the family name. And then if I type a space and then enter 2, all the 2's highlight. And so you'll notice that lighting space 2 does not appear in the same text string in the family name or the type name, but each of those individually is highlighted. So if I'm searching for a lighting 2x4, some type of 2x4 lighting device, those will highlight in either the family name or the type name. Now it is important that the spacing matches though, and let me show you what I mean by that. If I type 2x4 dash, then everything goes away. But if I type 2x4 space dash, then the dashes will highlight. And so the spacing in there matters, and as well as the text strings, but they do not have to be full text strings. It will also work off of partial text strings. So if I type light 2x4, those partial text strings will highlight. So the search field is a quick way to help you narrow down a type that you're looking for. So in this case, we'll use the 2x4-120 type. And in the contextual ribbon, we can see that there is a placement panel. And so this indicates that the light fixture is a face-based component, meaning that it can be placed on a vertical face or a horizontal face, and that could be a floor, a ceiling, using place on face, or you could select place on work plane and then host it to a level or another reference plane. So in this case, we want to place it in the ceiling, so I'll select place on face, and then when I hover over a ceiling, you can see the light fixture, and I can simply click to place it in the ceiling. Now, one important thing to note here is that we are using a face-based light fixture and placing it in a ceiling of a linked architectural model. If we were using a ceiling-based light fixture, in other words, a family that was created using one of the ceiling-hosted family templates, it would not be able to be placed in the ceiling of a linked architectural model. Same thing for a wall-hosted component. So if there was some type of wall-hosted light fixture, it would only be able to be placed on walls in a host model. It could not be placed in a linked model. So just to kind of summarize all that, if you want to host it to a linked architectural model, your lighting fixture families need to be created using a face-based template. Alright, I'll click Modify to end the command. Another thing I'll point out is it was relatively easy to snap it to the ceiling grids. If these ceiling grids change in the architectural model, the lighting fixtures will not update accordingly. So if the architect were to adjust these, say a foot, either way, this lighting fixture would not adjust accordingly. It would stay hosted into the ceiling, but it would not move with the ceiling grids. If you had ceilings in the host model and you placed a light fixture, they would adjust accordingly. But I do not recommend placing ceilings in an MEP model unless for whatever reason it was required. But typically those will be placed by the architect, and you can host using a face-based family. All right, the next thing we want to point out here is that the average estimated illumination parameter for the space is starting to fill in. So if I select one of the spaces that where we do not have light fixtures, you can see that it's 0. And in one of the spaces where we do have lighting fixtures, it is starting to populate based on the data from the lighting fixtures. If that was not populating, so let's say you had a light fixture placed, but it was not, the parameter was not populating, then it could be because the lighting fixtures are slightly offset from the ceiling, and so they're not being recognized by the space. And so if there is a gap there, and so a way to handle that is with the room calculation point. And you can enable that by selecting a lighting fixture and clicking Edit Family to open the lighting fixture in the Family Editor. And then in the Properties palette, you can see that there is a room calculation point parameter. When I enable that, then you can see a point appears in the drawing area. And now it's actually above the light fixture, and you can see this yellow symbol right here, and so this is actually the light source. And so the light source and the room calculation point are above the light fixture. And that's just because of the way the family is. That doesn't mean that it was created upside down. That's the way it's supposed to be created, and so that's okay. That's what we want. And so if this was, like I said, the lighting parameters were not being picked up by the space, you can enable the room calculation point, make sure it's moved a couple foot above the lighting fixture so that when you load it back in, then it will be recognized in the space because this point right here will be in the space. And in our example, it is reading fine, so we will not load that back in. Next, I'll switch back to the power ground floor view, and we'll zoom in to one of these rooms here, and we will place some electrical devices. And so another way that you can place, it could be lighting fixtures, equipment, lighting fixtures, is you can expand the Families branch in the project browser, and then you can locate the category of elements. So in this case, we'll expand electrical fixtures, and you can see all of the families that have been loaded into the project for that category. In this case, there's a duplex receptacle, and when I expand that branch, you can see two listings here, GFCI and standard. These are the two types that have been loaded in. And when I drag and drop one of those into the drawing area, the tool is activated. And so just like if I was placing an electrical fixture using the electrical fixture tool from the systems ribbon in the electrical panel, I'll go ahead and do that. And then the standard duplex receptacle is selected. So just another way to activate the tool. Once again, this is a face-based family. We'll do place on vertical face, and I'll click to place a few in the model. And so it's, once again, just hover over a wall and click, and those will be placed. And they will be placed at the scheduled level and the elevation from that level. I'll click Modified in the command, and then if needed, you can select it afterwards and adjust the level and height as needed. And then you can see that there's a host parameter, and then you can always use this offset from host parameter to move it away from the host object. So in this case, the host is a wall, so we can move it away or closer to the wall. Okay, next I will click Edit Type, and we'll look at a couple more things here. And so in In the type properties dialog, you can see a load classification parameter, and it is set to receptacle. And if I click the More button, it's going to open up the load classification dialog, and you can see that the demand factor is set to receptacle for this load classification type. And if you click the More button again, then it's going to open up the demand factors dialog. And so before you begin creating circuits, it's always good to make sure that your electrical fixtures are assigned to the correct load classification type.